It's Kate Drysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. In this live, I'm going to be talking about the October 15th, 2025 weekly newsletter. In case you're new here, each week I talk about the newsletter, I share a selection of the articles, and I talk about why some of the articles are of personal or professional interest to me. So this is your opportunity to listen to my reasoning, why I shared what I shared in the newsletter, and then decide which articles you specifically want to go and read. The newsletter is linked in the description box below. All of the individual articles are linked within the newsletter. You can also subscribe via the link below, or you can continue to listen to these YouTube lives each week. So let's get into it. So each week I try and have a theme to the newsletter. This week, the theme unwittingly became sexual harassment in the aquatic workplace. I was a little bit shocked to hear a story from a colleague here in my province of Alberta recently regarding what they felt was their termination from an organization who was not taking sexual harassment towards their employees very seriously. I'm being intentionally vague about this because they're subject to a non-disclosure agreement and they're not meant to be talking about it. But I'm not naive about sexual harassment in the workplace. I have certainly experienced sexual harassment in the public, from patrons, from suppliers and vendors. But I was still really discouraged to hear that in 2025, another aquatic professional felt that their position was terminated without cause because they were not willing to be quiet about some sexual harassment that had occurred in their workplace. So if you know me, you know I end up on these rabbit trails of personal interest, and that got me to thinking, well, I'm not suggesting that aquatics needs a Me Too movement, but there hasn't really been any conversation in the aquatics industry recently about what are some of the known challenges. I certainly, over the years, have witnessed patrons, customers, bathers hitting on my female lifeguards. I've even had situations where my female lifeguards have called me at 11 o'clock at night to say they think there's patrons waiting for them out in the parking lot. So again, I'm not naive, but I do want to do some ad hoc research. And so I am in the process of taking survey submissions to this anonymous survey. If you would kindly consider submitting any information that you have through the anonymous survey and then sharing the survey with your aquatic networks or your colleagues, any information is a starting point, I think, to potentially form a future newsletter topic or potentially a YouTube discussion or potentially a presentation. I've already had 8 submissions and the form has only been out for about 12 hours and it hasn't been posted in a lot of places yet. I've also had some text messages and DMs through social media. So I do think this is something that is going to be productive and unfortunately is probably still quite necessary in our industry. Beyond that, the rest of the newsletter is a normal newsletter. I do go through some news stories that are of particular interest. I started out by featuring a number of aquatic facilities from the World Water Park Association member magazine. So if you are a World Water Park Association member, which I am, Katie, as Lakeview Aquatic Consultants, you do get a paper magazine 8 to 10 times per year. It is behind a paywall. You are meant to be a member, so I am very selective in trying to adhere to that payment requirement and not widely share a bunch of articles that people haven't paid for. But I did want to highlight 2 particular facility features from that magazine. And this is one of the features I love about the WWA magazine is that they share parks that I've never been to, parks I've never even heard of. So one water park was featured in Nigeria, and I loved learning that in Nigeria, not everybody knows how to swim. And so thus the water park design incorporates a lot of features that are drive facilities. So families can still participate together, even if not everyone in the family is able to go in the water or doesn't know how to swim. I also liked the feature on Water Bomb Bali, which is a very famous water park that I hope to get to one day. Haven't been to Bali, although I've been to Asia. And I really like the uniqueness of Waterbomb Bali in terms of prioritizing saving local vegetation, a commitment to traditional local foods, unique services, a huge waste diversion program. And I think this is something that we should be seeing more of from our water parks, from our amusement parks going forward. So I did share those features by hosting the PDF articles directly on our website. And then I also shared a really nice business newsletter I get each week from the editor of Entrepreneur Magazine. His name is Jason Pfeiffer, and he shared in his newsletter last week a really good message I think that all of us could benefit from, whether you're a pool manager, just a regular employee out in the world, a business owner, that we just need to get started. His newsletter comes out once a week. I get something from it every week, but this particular week really stuck with me as something that I wanted to share with those of you who sometimes need to juggle a lot of balls, and sometimes we're overthinking the basic things that we can be doing. The rest of the articles that I shared in the October 15th newsletter, they don't really follow a theme, but something that I am definitely thinking about and pondering going into next week is the first article that I featured regarding the announcement earlier this week that Disney World, Disney amusement parks are going to be going up in price, the admission, and that's already later this week. My husband sent me this article because we are actually flying to Florida tomorrow for the World Water Park Association conference, which is next week. And then in the interim few days, we had made plans to go to Walt Disney World. We hadn't been in a number of years. We last attended, I believe, in 2019 with some family, 2018 on our own. Prior to that, I don't think I'd been to Disney until maybe 2015 or 2014. I'd been a few times as a child. My husband had been a few times separately. We are not Disney fanatics, but in keeping with the theme of hosting a conference at a destination, we decided to go a few days early and plan to go to the amusement park. All of this is a long way of saying that the articles I present are a number of discussion points regarding the increasing inaccessibility of a destination like Walt Disney World, whether it's Florida, Walt Disneyland in California, Disneyland in Paris, Tokyo, etc. I'm not naive about inflation, labor costs, supply chain issues, tariffs. I'm not even saying necessarily that Disney World should be or must be accessible to every family, every person, middle class or otherwise. But I myself, as a working professional who's very comfortable in terms of living, was shocked to see that the military discounted tickets that we are eligible for were 400 US dollars per person. So we were going to be spending almost $1,000 Canadian just to walk into amusement parks this weekend. And that's without meals, that's without souvenirs, that's without the hotel accommodation that Lakeview is paying for the conference. And so I don't have a fully formed opinion at this point. I think there's a lot of details that I don't have as a frequent park person or as a Disney fanatic. But on the flip side, the thing I said in the newsletter that comes to mind for me is I literally just got off of a cruise, and cruising is not for everyone, and cruising is not, a replacement for an amusement park. But the comparison was very stark for me that I just got off of a cruise for a comparable amount, let's say 600 Canadian for 4 days, going to Mexico with my meals, with my accommodation, with my activities. And then we're looking at a comparable amount of almost $600 Canadian to just attend amusement parks with no meals, no accommodation, no flights over the next couple of days. So it's definitely something that I think we need to be aware of in recreation on the commercial side when we're starting to think about water parks, when we're starting to think about the private sector and premium experiences. At what point are we pricing out the average user? And as long as we commit to that. So, for example, here in Alberta, the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise, which is a very high-end hotel accommodation, is a couple $1,000s a night during high season. Their new Glacial Basin Spa is priced as a very luxurious premium experience at $275 per person without food and beverage, without tip. I'm not suggesting that everything should be for every person, but this is where I'm saying I'm going to be thinking about this topic further as we go to Florida tomorrow, as we do some things at Disney World this weekend. We've settled on doing either one or both of the water parks because they are substantially cheaper at this time of the year. Maybe doing one amusement park as a drop in price, and then taking advantage of the other resources like Disney Springs or some of the public areas and just taking it chill. But it's something that I think is developing in my mind in terms of what is the future for recreation, amusement parks, water parks in this economy where people are struggling. And then further on, I did share an article from the New York Times that was quite controversial in August 2025 that I only recently came across regarding this working class family that was spending almost $7,000 or $8,000 to go to Disney World over the course of several days, and that even then they were not able to do all the rides or see all the things based on the stratification of lightning lanes and premium experiences that Disney World was reported making, over $800 million on lightning lane sales. So I don't want this YouTube live to turn into a whole discussion of Disney at this point, but it is something that I was definitely ruminating on after sending the newsletter, after reading more about the topic, and I'll update you if I have more thoughts after having been in Disney World again over the next week. Further in the newsletter, I shared the case I mentioned also last week in Fayetteville regarding a child who drowned at a daycare. This is different from the Bronx daycare drowning that occurred several months ago. And in fact, we shared on the Lakeview Aquatic Consultants Facebook page that that family has just sued the daycare in addition to trying to reach a new law in New York State about prohibiting daycares adjacent to residential pools or setting in place certain rules that they can't operate on the same site. In the newsletter, I also shared some articles pertaining to unfenced temporary pools. This is out of Australia as they head into the summer season and the Southern Hemisphere as we in North America head into winter. Often people think that we're setting up these temporary inflatable pools, what I would describe as an Intex pool. That is a brand, but it's a pop-up pool that people may purchase from a general retailer like Walmart or Costco, and they don't think it's a hazard, and it's just as much of a hazard as any other structure with water. It only takes a couple inches to drown. There was a spa shutdown recently in Cochrane, Alberta called The Cave. They were operating an illegal cold plunge. And I had a number of people in the certified pool operator class today ask me about why they were shut down. And to the best of my understanding, it is because it was a basin, i.e., like a bathtub, without recirculation, without filtration, without sanitation, i.e., chlorine, i.e., disinfection. It also appears from the photos as though the basin was made of wood, so a porous material, difficult to sanitize, not an impervious surface that we would typically see in commercial pool operations. And then the usual permitting issues. So they did not have a site or access number with Alberta Health Services. They did not have any types of procedures. They did not have a certified pool operator. And so basically, it was like if I was sharing the same ice bath, like in a bathtub with you and then someone else and then someone else and then someone else. It does not preclude the growth or spread of bacteria from person to person if that water is reused without the fundamental pool elements of filtration, sanitation, and circulation. The next few articles I shared in the October 15th newsletter, the city of Abbotsford in BC is looking to develop a swimming pool strategy. So a lot of growing municipalities and regions here in Canada really need to address how are we going to plan for life cycle maintenance if our population growth follows a certain curve or certain growth pattern. Are we going to end up with enough swimming pools in the future, the same way city or urban planners look at having enough schools, having the right roadways, having enough fire stations or police halls? There does need to be some thought going into some communities so that you don't reach a point where there is Airdrie being, the classic example here in Alberta. You have what is now almost a city of 70 to 95,000 people. Forgive me, I don't recall the exact number. And there's only one recreation center, one pool, because the neighborhood, which is a bedroom community outside Calgary, has grown so much over the last 5 to 10 years. Urban planning has not kept pace with the growth. Also this week, there was a update on the terrible story where a girl was found dead in a pool during a field trip to a local farm. I also shared an article pertaining to allegations in Phuket in Thailand that they are not doing enough to educate tourists about the dangers in the surf, like the surf conditions during monsoon season. The lifeguards are the only ones able to do any of this rescue or care, but that perhaps the tourism board or the local authorities could be doing more to educate tourists about the risks. But the counter argument being that maybe the tourism board doesn't want to promote how dangerous it could be. There was a YMCA I featured, I believe it was in Saskatchewan, that is looking to take over the Harry Bailey Aquatic Center. So I did link back to our newsletter regarding the SLS Center in Cochrane from a few months ago. You may recall that Cochrane, Alberta had a similar situation where there was a private bid for the local YMCA to take over operations. And residents really took issue with that at council. And so the plan did not go through. Nothing against the YMCA, but it is articulating that residents, ratepayers, the community have the right to contribute to these types of decisions because the YMCA will have a very clear vision in terms of lifeguarding, swim instructor ratios to students, programming, what they prioritize, as well as some philosophical differences, such as they don't necessarily work with liquor licensing or they don't necessarily promote certain types of activities that may already be established within that community. So that is definitely something that we'll continue to watch. And then the bulk of the rest of the newsletter is talking about this trend regarding contrast therapy, which I've mentioned throughout this year has been a growing part of our business, a growing demand here in Alberta. Nordic spas, cold plunge, saunas, steam rooms, all of those things are a huge, huge, huge growth sector in Alberta. I can't speak to every province or state, but anecdotally, you can see from some of the articles that I shared that the sauna market is growing by leaps and bounds, both commercially as well as in the private sector, residentially. There are also some specific things, whether that is something like Ofgus, which is a towel ceremony, whether there is other amenities. I shared, for example, the Alpha Club, which is being built in Oakville, Ontario, which will be kind of a men's club, wellness, weights, mentoring and coaching, barbering, a social club. There's a lot of different ways to position these types of facilities. And I know a lot of you are pool operators in the strictest sense of the word. You manage your chemicals, you manage your facility. You don't care about the latest newfangled trend. But this is definitely something coming down the pipe that we're going to start seeing incorporated in more facilities on demand. So that's it for this week. I hope to see you at the World Water Park Association conference. If you are there, look out for me, come say hi, and let's catch up. For those of you who are not traveling, I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you same time next week. Bye for now.